Hello, my name is Allison Corman, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast is How Happy Do You Need to Be to Have a Good Life? And the reason I bring this up today is there's a growing movement of videos and books and people talking about this idea that we can train our mind to be more positive. We could train ourselves to have better habits. We could train ourselves to not permit negativity into our lives. And although I think that we can let go of a lot of things in our lives, there are things that through training, through habits, that we could actually rise above. I also think there are certain things that have happened to us in our lifetime that can't be treated this way. There are hurts, there are traumas, there are things that maybe we haven't been able to let go of yet, or maybe things that will be with us our entire lives. And it doesn't mean that we can't still be happy, but to ignore them and to just say, well, I just have to be positive about things, to ignore these things that come up for us, it's not gentle. It's like a friend calling and trying to tell you, well, when I was young, my dad always called me dumb. And your response to your friend would be, well, you just have to stop thinking that way and train your mind to feel differently. And it's not that this friend doesn't have to look within, start to appreciate who they are, and they could look for evidence of their intelligence. They could love themselves more. They could start to heal that wound. But it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be moments in this friend's life where that comes up. And the mechanism is not stop that. The mechanism is more to look at it and to be kind and loving towards it and find a path that thought doesn't take center stage, to find a path back to a place where she believes in herself. And there are also certain people who ignore when certain feelings come up. And the problem with that, I find, is that if we don't deal with these hurts and these traumas and we don't find a way to nurture them, then when something really bad happens in our lives, we don't have the ability just to ignore everything, and it's almost like an explosion. In that example, it's like a friend calls you up and is trying to tell you why they don't feel smart, and you're like, ignore it. And again, we would never do that to a friend, so it feels like a type of bullying that we do to ourselves, because we think at this point, why are we still feeling the hurt and trauma for something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? And so how do we work this so these things that have happened to us don't own us, and we could find our way back to happy, back to joy, back to creating a good life? And I've noticed this about myself. And the clearest example I could give are the things that have happened to me in the past 5.5 years since my husband left me. Now, many of you who listen to my podcast know that I've been able to move forward. I've been able to heal. But sometimes hurt and pain still come up for me, and it's very unexpected. I know I've talked about this before, but I'm not as comfortable driving as I used to be. And I know a lot of this has to do with the fact that my ex-husband used to tell me that I was a bad driver all the time and how that made me feel. And then I stopped driving often, and I live in the city. So when it's time for me to drive somewhere, I feel some fear comes up. And I don't want to be nasty to myself about it. I don't want to say, just drive and forget about it, or get over yourself. I don't want to say that. But I also know I have to get into the car because I want to go visit my parents, or I want to go see a friend, or I want to go away. So for me, the process is more gentle. I will ask myself, why are you feeling this way? And at this point, I know, and I'm kind, and I acknowledge it, and I'm understanding of why I'm in that place. And we don't always have evidence in our past of why we can do something. But in this example, I have evidence of me being able to drive different places. And then I set my day up in a certain way that I make sure that I have the things that I need when I get in the car, that I make sure everything is plugged in. I make sure I have my music. I make sure I have a snack or a cup of coffee. Or sometimes there are certain friends I like to speak to when I drive. Even though I might not ever be the most comfortable person driving, I make the experience as good as possible. And then when I get where I need to go, I experience a lot of happiness and a lot of joy. I'm not letting my fears stop me, but I'm treating myself in a way that I would treat a friend, that I'm helping myself through the process. And maybe these things will always be with me. Maybe they won't. I have no idea. But if we are not kind and loving to ourselves, and we are going to bully ourselves through the things that bother us, or we're going to ignore the things that bother us, that's not a peaceful way to live. It doesn't feel like a nurturing way to live. It doesn't feel like we're on our own team. And again, there are things that we can train ourselves to stop. But there are certain things that are so tender in our lives, certain things that we've gone through that are going to be with us. And instead of making it our enemy, instead of being in conflict, instead of having a battle, we can welcome these things into our lives, that they're a part of us. So we sit down with it and we have a relationship with the things that we're afraid of. We are curious about it. We find ways to still move forward instead of judging and beating ourselves up for the things that we feel that we can't do. There are very few relationships that are enriching and positive that are filled with conflict. And yet, for some reason, we think that's acceptable to do to ourselves to move forward with our lives. So what can we do? I think we could all start looking at the things that bother us every day, the thoughts and fears that we have about relationships, about opportunities, about jobs, about ourselves, and investigate it when it comes up. And yes, there are certain things you can let go of, but let's look at how we approach ourselves. When we feel that we can't do something, do we investigate it? Do we try to connect it to why? And do we give ourselves compassion and understanding and encouragement? And when it doesn't turn out right, or we think we could have done a better job, do we beat ourselves up, or do we give ourselves a hug and say, I'm so happy that you tried this. How could we improve? How can we do better? It is a much more gentle, loving, kind way to live, and it does add to our happiness. When we are not in conflict with ourselves, we have more of a flow. When we are not in conflict with ourselves, there's less negativity. And when there's less negativity, the moment is open. When there's less negativity, you will see more possibilities. You will see more opportunities. When there's less resistance, our fears quiet down. And what's so interesting is with the love and the nurturing, we start to feel more capable. I know when I set myself up for a good trip or a good car ride, it's a totally different experience. And then I'm able to look forward to different things I want to do with less fear and worry. And again, I know I'm giving simple examples, but there are other things for me that are deeper. I'm just giving you something that's tangible. And what's so interesting too, the more we do it and the more love, we do build a resilience within. And to me, that is an overcoming. Even if you're living with the fear, even if it's always with you, it's a much more peaceful way to live internally when we welcome all of us to the table. Even if we think it's good or bad or ugly, it's all of who we are. And when we start to work together with all of who we are, there's more peace. And when there's more peace, there's more happiness. And yes, the moment comes with some baggage, but it doesn't mean we're going to take it into the next moment. Or, like we've been talking about, there's a way to have a different relationship with it so we could still move forward with our dreams. So whatever your fear is, speaking up at work, getting another job, going back to school, having a new relationship, there's a way to be with our fears that they don't stop us. But we don't need to bully ourselves. We can be kind and loving to ourselves. And we can work with it, and we can find a way forward even though it exists. And we can look at the future and know that it's an unlimited field of possibilities, that there's always hope, there's always change, and there's always room for happiness, and there's always room for a good life. Nobody's life is perfect. I've never met a person that has no fears, no pain, no trauma. It is a part of life. It's how we work with it. We don't need to ignore it. We don't need to beat ourselves up about it. There's a way to be collaborative with all of who we are. And that's where the peace and the joy and the presence come in. And that's when you get to enjoy your life more. Because if you're not in conflict with yourself, if there's happiness, you're going to feel it. If there's joy, you're going to feel it. If there's an opportunity, you're going to know it. Because you're flowing with the river, not against it. You have what it takes to have a better relationship with the pains and the traumas in your life. And you have what it takes to be kind and loving towards yourself. And you have what it takes to look into the unknown future and know that because it's unwritten, maybe you could still have the life that you want. And maybe there's something in this moment left to experience. And just because your dreams haven't happened yet doesn't mean a thing. You are not out of time, and no fear can steal your dreams. And most of all, maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to read my books, The Gift of Maybe or A Year Without Men, they're available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you'd like to listen to the audiobook for The Gift of Maybe, which was just released, you could find it on all major audio platforms. And if you like this podcast, I hope you subscribe and leave a comment.